Finally, governments in Canada have realized that we have a housing crisis, and they're starting to propose some solutions. But is it too little, too late? Hey there, welcome back to Bald Prairie Real Estate. My name is Matthew Pfeifer. That's my trusted assistant Matilda. This is the weekly news recap here where I go through what I think are the most interesting news-related topics all around the Canadian real estate market. And this is an absolutely jam-packed episode. We're talking jobs numbers, inflation numbers, some new rules in Saskatchewan around showings I think is going to be really interesting. We're talking about the most recent rent report, and most importantly, two big proposals that the federal government has put forward, kind of floating this out there to see what people think, that could have a very significant impact on the Canadian real estate market. But of course, let's start this off with another one of my terrible bad dad jokes. What types of music do chiropractors like? Hip hop. If you have a terrible joke that I can use in a future episode, put it in the comments below. Let's get into this week's Canadian real estate news. Let's start off by talking about the most recent Stats Canada jobs numbers that just came out. So with all of these Stats Canada jobs numbers, remember that these things have a tendency to get revised up and down significantly after the fact. We saw earlier in 2023, jobs numbers being revised by 10, 20, 30,000. It was crazy how much things would swing. This past month, they said Canada added 100 jobs. Yes, 100 jobs. Obviously, that is basically statistically unimportant. Now, the market expectation was we would see a higher number of jobs. In the United States, they added something like 200,000 jobs in the month, obviously very significant. Why am I bringing this up in a video about Canadian real estate? Well, most importantly, people that have jobs obviously can continue to qualify for mortgages, and they're going to continue to make their mortgage payments. Once we start seeing job losses, that's when people get behind on their mortgage payments or no longer qualify to buy a house, and that's where the impact on the Canadian real estate market is. As well, really, the Bank of Canada actually wants to see soft jobs numbers. They want GDP to start contracting. They, I think, actually truly want a recession, because they got to slow the economy down to get inflation down. So if people don't have jobs, they're obviously not going to go out and spend more. So really, lower jobs numbers are better in terms of what the Bank of Canada is looking for, although it may not be better for you if you're out looking for a job right now. Next up is an article with an economist from Deloitte talking about rate cuts might be on the horizon. First off, we got to put this in context because this article was written before the most recent inflation data came out. Of course, that was 3.4%. We're gonna be talking more inflation in just a minute here. It was 3.1% the previous month, so trending up, not down. This article was written with the assumption that these were gonna come in lower, but they're saying that there's a possibility rate hikes might be on the horizon. I know this has been talked about ad nauseum, probably for about a year. I've been talking about potential rate hikes coming, or rate cuts coming, sorry. And we've got the Bank of Canada who's got meetings in January, March, and April, and then in June, and continue on from there. But those are kind of your spring meetings. I don't think we're gonna see rate cuts in any of those meetings. April, maybe at the earliest. I think June is the first time we see rate cuts, but we'll have to wait and see. They are expecting that the Bank of Canada will eventually settle out at a rate of about 3%. Previously, it's been sub 2%. So that's kind of the thing that coming down from where it is right now, 5% down to 3%. That's pretty significant, a 2% interest rate cut. We'll have to wait and see, but that's just one opinion from Deloitte here. Next up are some rule changes from the Saskatchewan Real Estate Association. So the Saskatchewan Real Estate Association is now making it mandatory that sellers must disclose to buyers if their house has audio and video surveillance in and outside the property. Before, this was not a requirement, and I would always tell my buyers, when we're in a house, assume that you are being recorded, and anything you say in that house, the sellers are going to hear as well. So we don't talk about, maybe what we think would be a fair price and a negotiation strategy, etc. We just go through the house and make sure that we're respectful when we're going through the house as well. We have seen, obviously, real estate agents in the past caught, drinking someone's milk out of their fridge and putting the milk carton back. We're not gonna be doing stuff like that. I like that now this is mandatory, that they're gonna have to disclose it. Before they didn't have to. Again, it's their property, their house. They can do whatever they want in their house. So now when you have audio video surveillance, you're going to have to disclose that. All the agents and potential buyers going through the house will know that that is in that house. Now we should talk about the inflation numbers as they just came in from Stats Canada. This past month, the inflation was 3.4%. That is up from the previous month's 3.1%. It was, though, kind of where economists are expecting. We have seen inflation trending down and then the odd jump up here and there. This is one of those jump ups. The good news out of all of this is that the month over month was actually a 0.3% decline. And last year it was 8 out of 12 months, I believe it was, that inflation actually dropped month over month. So that is good news going forward. Core inflation, which is what the Bank of Canada really likes to watch. Now there's a couple of different types of core inflation, core median, core trim, etc. What you need to know is that the core inflation is taking out volatile things like food and energy prices, because those can fluctuate all over the place. And that is what drove the headline inflation up actually this past month, because a year ago, gas prices were a fair bit cheaper. But the core inflation jumped up from 3.5 to 3.7%. So gas prices don't impact that. What is it that's causing inflation to go up? Well, there's two important factors here. Mortgage interest costs drove up inflation. That accounts for 28% of all the inflation in this overall number. And the price of rent drove it up nearly 10%. So shelter costs are the biggest drivers of overall inflation. Of course, mortgage interest rates, those have gone up because of the Bank of Canada raising interest rates, as well as what's been going on in the bond market. And the price of rent has gone up from interest rates going up, but also a lot of competition in the rental market with a massive increase in population this past year. Rentals.ca has their most recent monthly rent report. Let's dive into it. Once again, rent continues to increase in Canada, up 9% year over year. It is up 22% in the last 2 years alone. The 5-year average, including 2020, when we saw rents drop 5% a year, is just under 5% at 4.6%. So rent has continued to increase quite rapidly in Canada. Now, generally, November through February is when we see the price of rent dropping. So it's a little unexpected to see, because there was a month over month increase in rents this past month. So to go from December to January and see rents go up, that is a little bit surprising. Rentals.ca, when they're talking kind of in this report, it's a good one. You should dive into it. I'm going to link the article in the description below, because they do a lot of really interesting breakdowns in different cities and stuff like that. But they're saying that they expect in 2024 rent to continue to increase, but it to return back to that 5% average. So they don't think we're going to see these double-digit increases that we have been seeing the last couple of years, expecting more of a 5% increase in 2024. CMHC just released its most recent housing starts report, and it's not good news if you're the government of Canada trying to get more houses built. Overall, we saw the number of homes started down 7% in 2023 versus 2022. 25% down when it comes to single family homes. And I'm expecting the 2024 numbers are going to be worse than what we saw this last year. I think it's going to be a fairly significant drop as well. Of course, this is not good news when we're seeing population increase at over 1 million people per year. This is unsustainable. I've talked about this ad nauseum. You guys have heard it before. And why are we seeing, even with a huge, clearly demand for housing, why are we seeing the housing starts dropping? Simply put, many projects are just not financially viable right now. When it comes to higher interest rates, that is a huge problem. You just simply cannot get your construction financing and make that project make sense. So really right now, it is very hard to get anything built if you're building, for example, purpose-built rentals and have it financially make sense, unless you've got things like the CMHC MLI program, which is 50-year amortizations and really good interest rates, government grants, lower taxes. I've talked about that ad nauseum as well. Until we start seeing governments of all stripes and all levels attacking the cost to build, so interest rates are going to be a huge part of it, taxes, fees, everything else, we're not going to get enough houses built to match our current population. So we either need to find a way to make it cheaper to build houses or match population to our ability to build houses. And we're going to be talking about that because the government has all of a sudden started to talk about that. That's coming up right away here. Last two major points, I'm combining them into one here because they kind of play off each other, is the government has got two major proposals for housing in Canada. Now, before we unpack this, we got to preface this with that both of these are just policy ideas. They're floating this out there to see if it gets any political traction. Then, of course, if it does, they may act on it. The first is talking about international students. We've seen a huge surge in international students come to Canada, about 800,000 per year now coming to Canada. And there is a significant issue where there are quote unquote universities, and there's quotations, they're not actual schools, but people are setting up universities to have people come to Canada. They charge them heavy fees, but these people are doing that because it is a short track to getting permanent residency status, which is what they're looking for. Kind of allows you to bypass the regular permanent residency line. Now, what I think is interesting out of all of this is that the federal government is saying, well, we need to consult with the provinces and the universities, and they need kind of the provinces that aren't, playing along per se, I think is what they said, that we need them to kind of shape up and be part of the solution. Well, the federal government issues student visas, not the provinces. They could just cap it tomorrow and say, we're only allowing 500,000 international students per year, and that would be the end of it. Now, they're saying they're going to study this for the next couple of months through the spring and then make some policy decisions in about a year. The year timeline is really interesting. The second policy idea is that they are going to potentially tie immigration numbers to housing starts. Really, really interesting. I've only been talking about this for 2 years now, I'd say. The federal conservative leader, 𝗂𝗂 Poilievre, has been talking about this more recently, and it's been getting a lot of political traction. All of a sudden, it seems like it's a great idea. Since 2015, we've seen it ramp up well over 300,000 to now the target is 500,000 permanent residents. So they've doubled it in just the past decade, basically. We have not seen housing starts match that. CMHC's talked about it. We're projected to be short 3.5 million homes. I think they've upped that projection now to 4 million homes. So really interesting that now that this has got some political traction, we're starting to see the federal government talk about doing these things. Again, with this one, no action immediately. So for the next year, we're going to see probably about 1.2 million people come to Canada through temporary permits or permanent student visas and permanent residency. And they're going to look at making some policy changes for 2025. And what's happening in 2025? The next federal election is scheduled for 2025. Isn't that rather interesting? They've had a decade to work on this. Now they're behind in the polls, and an election is about a year away. And now they're talking about doing these, just in time for a federal election. Rather interesting. That's a wrap on this week's hottest Canadian real estate news. If you're thinking about buying a house, if you're in Regina, obviously I would love to help you out. But if you're not in Regina, anywhere else in Canada, and you're looking for a great real estate agent, in the description of this video, there's going to be a link to my calendar where you can book me in for an appointment, and I will call you, ask you about what's important to you in a real estate agent, what you're looking for in a house, get to know you, and then I'm going to get you paired up with the perfect agent in your real estate market. If you love the video, guys, please give this video a like. The algorithm loves it. If you haven't subscribed already, please, go ahead down there, hit that subscribe button for me. Leave some comments below so we can chat in the comment section. I always love engaging with you guys there. And as always, thank you very much for watching.